A little bit about me before we get into the topic. So, I come with close to 10 years of product management experience across consumer tech and B2B, working across three organizations. So, started with Bosch, handling Industry 4.0 solution capabilities, moved into IoT, and then I was working with Walmart's e-commerce arm in India called Flipkart, where I was handling customer experience and returns as charters, and currently I'm the principal PM for M3 India, handling basically the edtech platform of M3, which is into medical entrance exam prep. So, what do we have on the agenda? So, as Raki explained the topic, we would be going through a very pertinent concept around responsible AI. And I would be sharing my insights into it, what is the industry insights into it, and also from my experience and the best practices, what can we do as product managers, as data scientists, and as participants of the entire product development process to be more responsible while we are visualizing products, while we are building products, and when we are shipping it to the users. How can we think about the ethical considerations pertaining to AI as part of our work? Right? So yeah, this is a rough agenda which we will be encompassing during the course of today's session. A few ground rules before we get into it. So this session is meant not to acquaint you with topics like supervised, unsupervised learning, and all of that. That is on the technical aspects of AI. This is more to do with thinking about how to develop a responsible AI strategy, acquainting you with some examples from the past. How do we learn from them? How do we incorporate different AI principles while building products? So, view this session from a point of view of a combination of best practices slash um, um, mindset development towards building AI products, right? So just setting the expectations before we get started. So yeah, we just concluded the Lok Sabha elections in India, and like it is with a lot of recently concluded elections, we see a lot of news and advent of deep fakes which have gone live. So I believe all of you are users of different social media apps, and I'm sure you know the concept of deep fakes. And this is only going to increase, as we go on and we go forward. So these kind of news articles, also the advent of conversational AI through Chat GPT, and then going further with video generation and audio generation with DALI, with Sora, etc. We are going to find more and more pervasiveness of such things, right? So just wanted to set the context with what we are grappling today, the world we are in, and how it is going to further become more and more messy in terms of the advent and the scale at which AI is going to be going forward. So, what is responsible AI? Right? Just setting the elephant in the room straight here, that so when we talk about AI, it is mimicking or trying to be predictive about how humans behave and then building systems around it. But responsible AI takes that definition into a different territory, extends its meaning, wherein we bring in a certain degree of uh, code of conduct, compliance, and ethical standards into practice. So, for example, if I'm a product manager at Flipkart and I want to build um, a video generated search or an audio generated search. Let us say a simple example that I want to remove the textual search of Flipkart, wherein a user need not type in the item he or she needs to buy, but they can just speak it, and without using a filter, they can find the right categories or specific product pages. So, for example, if you're looking to buy, say, a set of top and bottom for a beach holiday, you don't have to go to bottom wear and top wear categories and search for products. You can just say that, please suggest good outfit for my next beach holiday, and you'll get all the combinations, right? So that is what AI can do to you. Responsible AI would be how we are ensuring that there is adequate attention given to all the sellers I have in my ecosystem. I'm not giving preferential treatment to any specific seller, nor I am leaving out, because of some inherent biases, any consumer cohort who is not able to access this feature. So encompassing all the different dimensions of your feature from the lens of removal of biases, removal of any discriminatory practice, and making it transparent and democratic for the entire ecosystem, both the user side and the supplier side. That would make it a responsible AI system, right? This is a very important concept for us to imbibe as product managers and also as data scientists, because there are systems in place for us, but they are all, at all times, these systems are getting trained, getting improved, getting optimized, and there is a very high likelihood that we can miss out on a specific dimension of the user universe, a specific dimension of the compliance, a specific dimension of some of the stakeholders in this journey of chasing or improving or innovating through AI. Right? I hope this example rings a bell. I wanted to start with like a e-commerce example because all of us typically have heard about or have used e-commerce. So it just helps you understand the meaning of AI versus responsible AI. Now, why is it important? As PMs, I always say start with why. So why is responsible AI critical? First point, it helps in managing risks. So when you are thinking about AI from the lens of responsible AI and ethical standards, you automatically include some level of risk management into place, that what if scenarios. If I'm doing something and X is the output, what if X does not come out to be the output? So you think it from a feedback loop or a 360-degree perspective. Secondly, you also bring into the entire picture the regulatory compliance, because you are having sort of standard which is set by a statutory body in that country. We will also be talking about some regulatory standards during the latter half of the presentation. But regulatory compliance also acts as a sort of a guardrail, which makes you more accountable as an organization, as a product development team, to make sure that whatever you are delivering and deploying in at scale, which is available for use publicly, is having all those elements in place, which make sure that it won't cause any harm to the larger audience. And thirdly, it helps in bias mitigation. So in bias mitigation, there are a lot of examples also around mitigating biases when it comes to designing AI systems, and how it is important of selecting the right cohort which is representative of the larger audience. So for example, if say at Flipkart, again, I'll give an example that we are designing something for the entire Flipkart universe, but the data model is trained on data points which are heavily representative of the tier one audience, it may lead to some sort of skewed output, because the sensibilities of tier one audience, which is the metropolitan audience, versus the tier two and tier three audience is different. For example, tier two, tier three audience or users could be much more value sensitive in terms of their price sensitivity, or in terms of the low selling price items, right? Whereas metropolitan or tier one users could be speed sensitive. Now, if you are using only one cohort and training your model and building your AI capability on top of that model, it is inherently going to lead to some sort of a skewed output, which will not be holistic, and hence it will not govern the principles of responsible AI, right? So I use the phrase principles of responsible AI. So these are the five principles which act as guardrails for the entire organization to make sure that whenever you are deploying and creating and deploying AI capability, you view it from all the three, all the five aspects of these principles which are mentioned. So we have fairness and inclusiveness, transparency, privacy and security, reliability and safety, and accountability. We'll go through all of these five principles just to give you a sense of what do they mean and how they differ. They may sound a little bit like overlapping when you read it for the first time, but there is a reason why all five of them are considered, right? So let's start with fairness and inclusiveness. So this is the point which I was explaining about bias mitigation as one of the whys of a responsible AI, right? So this is an extension of that point. So this principle indicts that the AI systems should treat everyone fairly, and there should not be a bias towards user belonging to a specific demographic aspect. It could be basis gender, race, sexual orientation, religion, and if you also extended the demographics to say location and geographic, it would also
Hi, is there an issue or it is just me?
No, I think we all have
Yeah,
the same.
hi. It seems that we have lost Udit's voice, so just remain on the call. We're just finding the
Sure, sure.
connection. Hi, Udit. Am I audible? One second, please.
I hope I'm audible now. There was a network issue.
Yeah.
Yes, you're audible with it.
Okay. Is my screen visible to all?
Yes, now
It's,
it is.
it is
Earlier
still
it was.
loading for me.
No, but there seems to be a network issue.
Is it loaded for everyone now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Great, great. Apologies for that. I
no problem.
Udit, I hope you are able to access the code also.
Yes, will check that.
you're the co-host.
Issue happening there, I think, but I think it's okay. We will continue.
Yeah, yeah. You let me know, I'll run the call.
Sure, sure, sure. All right. So I was explaining on the first principle of fairness and inclusiveness. So I believe this point was clear. It was also an extension of the example that I was giving of how your output can get skewed if you miss out on certain aspects of the demographic or you don't consider that into your model creation. And how it is important that you are as holistic as possible while creating a model, especially if you're working on a large scale deployment and a product which has a massive user base. Now, one could argue that we are building it for a specific cohort and hence our algorithm can be skewed. Of course, you can think it from that perspective, but I would still feel that if that is the case, it should be propagated and should be made as a part of your release note to the at least to the immediate audience that yes, this particular algorithm is going to function in certain way so that you come there's no trust deficit between the organization who is deploying it and the users who are consuming it. So it will also be propagating the concept of or the principle of transparency if you do such a thing. Yes, so that brings us to the second principle of transparency. So it is one of the cornerstones basically. I think I need not even explain the importance of being transparent. So as developers, as PMs, we must clearly define the intended outcome of the AI system. Why was it even created, right? There has to be a clear goal, and that goal should also be communicated on the user side, that this is how our AI system works, this is how data processing happens, and the predictive model is built on XYZ paradigm. So that needs to be communicated to make it more transparent. A very good example, which would be easier for you to follow, those who are nascent into the space of product or AI as a whole. Um, I think there was a lot of flack generated recently on Instagram because a lot of folks were using AI generated image or using some sort of deep fakes. So Instagram, I think, at least in its beta, launched something like a tagging which says generated with AI, or even for creators, it created something like it's a paid collaboration or something like that. So the paid collaboration thing has nothing to do with AI. It is more to do with trust. But the concept of having these tags and making the users follow this tag, the tagging of your reels or post, is a good step towards the principle of transparency, because it kind of makes a creator more uh, transparent to the consumer of the content, that whatever this person is broadcasting or propagating or trying to influence with is the motive behind it is maybe there is a monetary motive, or is it the way it is created is through AI, so I need to consume it in that way. So there is a need of tagging content based on how it is generated and the motive behind it. So transparency exactly talks about those elements, the out intended outcome of a model, and also the communication to the larger user base on how that AI system is working. Um, Before we go forward, I would also like to gauge the audience a bit, just so that I can calibrate my examples to make it more interactive for you. So, Rakhi, if you can just float the two polls that we created for the audience, just to see what kind of demographics we have today. It
Yeah.
would help me to further give slightly better or make it slightly more interactive for the learners.
Sure. So everyone, we are launching the
Just
poll. Please share your responses. Is the poll visible to all of you?
We'll keep it live for
Yeah.
maybe 10 to 15 seconds. So
Yes.
just two questions, three questions. So if you could just quickly fill it. Naki, you can also publish the results after 15 seconds.
Sure. We are closing the poll now. Are the results
Okay.
visible?
Yeah. Yes, it's visible to me. All right. I think it's fairly diverse. We have quite a few experienced professionals I see here, and almost everyone who has responded, 8 respondents have said that they have no experience in developing AI solutions. Okay. Uh, all right. Cool. So I'll keep it light on the specific AI aspects and more on the aspects which apparently could be more relatable for the audience to follow and to consume. Right? So what I did here also is a step towards, you can say, bias mitigation. So I did not go ahead with bias. I used real-time data to calibrate my delivery for today. So which is my output. So it's not an AI output; it's a human output. But this same sort of mindset is what we also need to translate while we are developing systems, where we get user feedback regularly, where we try to gauge how the user pulses, right? All right. I hope I'm audible to all.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, you're audible.
All right. So yeah, now we move to the third principle of responsible AI, which is privacy and security. So security and privacy have been one of the first AI principles which got highlighted because of the regular security related breaches, attacks, and sharing of sensitive information that has happened, sharing of sensitive information without consent, which has happened across globe. And I think it's been quite a number of years, almost decades, since we had GDPR being launched for European Union region, and the California Consumer Privacy Act, which was launched for a specific state in the US. And then there are more such regulations and public-private partnerships building some frameworks to make sure that there is some sort of a legal aspect to cybersecurity attacks or people misusing, mishandling data, right? So this is a point which you may have heard the most about in terms of the five principles and the steps being taken. Next is the principle of reliability and safety. So we talked about the intended purpose and the communication of the purpose when we were talking about transparency. Uh, but when we talk about reliability and safety, it talks about the requirement for testing and validating it for even scenarios outside the normal prescribed conditions. So there has to be something like, if this is supposed to work within that environment, we need to ensure that it is not giving an output outside that environment, right? So limiting the use of a specific model. So this has to do with a robust monitoring and like, for example, all of us may have heard about A/B testing. So whenever we launch something for our applications, we do an A/B testing, which is that we define the user base into test users and the control users, and we ensure that the new feature is exposed only to test and not to control. And then we compare the metrics or whatever success metrics that we started with, right? So this is talking about the same thing, the reliability, that if we have defined a specific use case for a specific cohort, is it working fine for that cohort, and how is it working outside that cohort, so that we know that there is no intended or unintended manipulation that is happening, or we don't have surprises as a result of it. So this is what reliability and safety principle is all about. And finally, the last principle is accountability. So organizations must identify the roles and responsibilities of all stakeholders who are involved. So typically what we do in my organizations currently also, so whenever we have any model being prepared, it could be a rule-based intelligence model, or it could be data modeling, we do define the RACI metric. So who is responsible, who is accountable, who is to be consulted, and who is to be informed. So RACI, that's called RACI. So we build that to ensure that we know, and it is visible to the large organization, that who is actually responsible, who is the supporting business unit, and who all are typically involved in creating it. And this is done to make sure that there is no loose thread when we are developing it, and all the people who are involved, they are pretty much aware about what is their job at it, and your reputation is also at stake at times when you're developing a large scale system. So it brings in that work ethics. It also brings in a stricter adherence to the principles of AI system development. So it is very, very critical that in future, as I saw, most people have not worked on AI solutions yet, but in case you build something which is around data modeling or around even rule-based AI development, make sure that you have a complete knowledge of who all are the stakeholders involved, who all are building it, and make sure that you publish that RACI also, right? So quickly, some examples, which can make it slightly more interesting and relatable for the folks. So this is an example from the BFSI industry where there was, I think this is about 3 years ago, this happened. There was a discrimination in credit scoring. So there is a product in the US called Apple Card, right? And Goldman Sachs is the banking partner for, or was the banking partner for this. So Apple and Goldman Sachs were, they were facing allegations that Apple Card uses an algorithm that is discriminating against women in the credit score evaluation, right? So the company denied the claims, including their co-founder, Steve Wozniak, that this is not true. But there were evidence which was shown from the user that I think there was some gentleman who shared that he and his wife both have similar credit history, but their credit scoring was almost, I think, 100 points adrift. So one of the reasons, which apparent reasons for this, could be an algorithmic bias, right, which defies the principle of inclusiveness and fairness. So the first principle that we talked about, fairness, it could be that the credit scoring modeling which Apple did was taking into account maybe certain skewed user base which was male dominated, or it could be of a certain demographic which had very little representation from the other gender, and that led to such scores being shown to the users, right? So and this was at the scale of Apple and Goldman Sachs. So you can imagine how easy and common it would be for smaller scale organizations or uh, credit card organizations who are dealing with smaller user bases to have such practices. So yeah, this is a very pertinent example of lack of inclusion and fairness. Then another relatable example I think would be about Uber, wherein in the US they were using a secretive algorithm to determine Uber driver pay. So I think everyone knows the business model of Uber, right? So Uber charges a commission, um, which is a percentage of the cost of a ride, and they take that commissions as their share of the P&L, and the rest is transferred to the driver. But this was a scenario wherein drivers reported a consistently drop in their earnings, which means that sudden change in algorithm led to Uber charging a higher commission for themselves without communicating any such change to the larger driver universe. So it is what was called the black box algorithm. So they did not know, the drivers did not know what changed, but they were consistently reporting a drop in their revenues through Uber. Uber, like most organizations working at that scale to handle their reputation and to make sure that they are still trustworthy, they denied that we have started to charge more commissions. They called it that this is a much more transparent policy. This is a flat commissions scheme, etc., and all of that. But again, if you read about it on the internet, there are some screenshots also which are posted by drivers stating that the pre and post, how was it different. So pre launch of this um, algorithm and the post launch of this algorithm, how the difference was. So this particular scenario is violating the principle of transparency, right? So by and large, all the issues that you see around AI, around irresponsible AI, they will be defying at least one of the five principles which we just discussed. So as members of the product development organizations, how can you don that hat of a responsible AI champion and view your solution end to end from all those lenses, and make sure that when you are developing it, and especially when you are deploying it, you deploy it with a more responsible perspective, right? Some more examples which I felt like sharing here quickly. So we discussed BFSI and consumer tech. So there's one more example from healthcare, which again had a data modeling which underrepresented data for women and minority groups. For example, there was a CAD system which found to return lower accuracy results for Black patients than white patients. This was again in the US. And I think the California Act, which I talked about, uh, came to light after such incidents wherein more and more misrepresented data sets were being used for building AI systems. Then you have applicant tracking systems. So this was into I think HR. This is into HR domain, and Amazon stopped using a hiring algorithm after it discovered that it favored applicants or gave them a higher score if they use words like executed or captured, which were more commonly found on men resumes. So inherently, it was inadvertent, but it was leading to more shortlisting for a specific gender. So Amazon stopped using this algorithm post this observation. Then in online advertising, there are biases in search engine ad algorithms. I think there was an independent research carried out at Carnegie Mellon, which revealed that Google's online advertising system displayed high paying positions to male more often than to women. So it was also to the extent of male dominated businesses. So where um, uh, that it's in public domain that the management is more male dominated, it gave them higher paying positions to put their ads on, which inadvertently leads to higher ranking on the Google search page, because the algorithm is built like that you will be, if you're able to get those high paying positions, your search results ranking will be higher, which would lead to better CTRs, better landing page visits, and the entire funnel of your organization can get better. So this is again the algorithmic bias which happened. Next was image generation. So I think all of you have heard about Mid Journey, right? So when when you ask Mid Journey to create to create images of people in specialized professions, it showed both younger and older people, which was expected. But the older people it showed was predominantly men. It means that when the model was being created for Mid Journey, it was skewed to the extent that there were very few training data which had older women being mentioned there. Yeah, so it kind of, this practice reinforced gender bias of the role of women in workplace. It means there were less working women who were older, um, right? So it brings out the cultural aspect also. So as a society, we have some cultural biases, right? And we are trying to get rid of. But our data on which these models are trained kind of reinforce those cultural biases. So it's kind of funny in a way that we are working towards an AI based solution, and we are futuristic, but it kind of brings back those primitive and orthodox practices somehow, because the data that we are training it on is, after all, built such way. So yeah. And finally, another example on predictive policing tools. So predictive policing tools, which are used by some organization in the criminal justice system, are supposed to identify areas where crime is likely to occur. However, they often rely on the historical arrest data, right? So which can reinforce existing patterns of racial profiling, and it can target certain minority communities who historically have been into criminal activity. So it again takes into account that because you did something in the past, this is how it is going to be, and it is not representative of the current scenario. So these kind of practices are something which are in front of us today. And we know that these happen because of some algorithmic biases, or lack of reliability, or lack of transparency in communicating to the end user. And they should act like guardrails. So I think all of you, when you're designing any solution, when you build your PRDs, you mentioned success metrics, right? Similarly, along with that, you mentioned guardrail metrics. So these examples should act like guardrails, that what if something like this, how can we prevent a certain output from getting to the forefront? So you, as part of the development teams or data scientists or PMs, need to incorporate this as part of your PRDs, or at least be evangelists in your organizations when you are building solutions. Right? So we talked about uh, the why and the what. Now, how can we balance innovation and ethics? Any frameworks or any thought process? So I've tried to list down a few things which I feel can be a good way for you to start. So I talked about being an evangelist. I talked about incorporating it in your PRDs. Now, what does that mean? How can you go about doing it? So that is what I wanted to go through. Uh, Please feel free to ask any clarification questions on the part covered till now. In case you have any doubt, you can put it in the chat, and we can go through it together. Or you can also, yes, Ravindra.
Yeah, Udit, you spoke about, RACI, right? That, you have, identified people who are responsible, who should be consulted.
Yes.
In that RACI, is it only limited to the organization in which you work? Or, for example, you mentioned about California Act and stuff like that, right? So, in RACI, if when it comes to people who are informed, they also inform the regulators before you build a model that, this is what we're trying to do, and this is the output that we are, trying to deliver using the data that we have, or is the RACI only limited to the organization?
So these California Act or GDPR, or now we have the EU AI Act, these are kind of frameworks which are already available in public domain. And when your organization is building any AI solutions, it is your prerogative. I repeat, it is your prerogative as the organization to view these frameworks, see what they entail, and incorporate it. Right. So there is very little scope of checks happening on the fly, that someone, a representative from GDPR, is going to visit you and do all of that. Now with that legislation being created, it is your prerogative to make sure that whichever team is responsible for developing that solution takes that into account. So when I use the phrase RACI, I used it in the context only of the organization. So as at an org level, we should define
Okay.
who all are responsible. And the team which is responsible, it's their prerogative to make sure that they either liaison with some GDPR POC, or they use the data which is available. There is a lot of frameworks and guidelines available for developers, data scientists to consume, and they make sure that they are adhering to it.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
All right. Yes, the Gagan also has a question. Okay, no, Gagan is joining the call. Okay. Any other questions, or we can move
I
ahead?
believe Siddharth
Yeah.
had a question.
I have a question.
Sure.
Thanks, Udit. Very informative. I have a question regarding I think you were talking about biasness,
Yes.
like of the algorithms. Even like as moving ahead, do we see an ecosystem where, like, how do we watch the watchman? Is the question. And on a bigger picture, is there a system being built that is looking over these biasness, or it is only the discoverability is only when somebody points out the flaw?
Yeah, very good question, and very difficult for me to answer it at the moment. So,
I mean, the way I
by
see
and
it,
large,
yeah,
yes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I see it. It's gonna pan out the way how life pans out,
Yeah.
where situations come in front of us and we course correct. But if we
Correct.
are entering the world of AI, at least the baseline that I see is uh, intelligence, which is slightly superior, uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
only in terms of AI. So that is I mean, while we were talking about cases with Uber and issues when Amazon had in their interview process, this is
Yeah.
what I was thinking about. So I'm currently unsure that how is how is an organization like, what is their motive to currently be as responsible as you said.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the biggest motivators is the trust deficit, which can lead to shareholder loss. So if the examples you see are mostly the public organizations which have tried to course correct when they were caught off guard. It is predominantly because of the user base they have, the trust they have enjoyed over the years, and they want to set the benchmarks. And watching the watchmen will still take time, but at least through the legislations coming into the picture, and through how informed the user is becoming. So that is where I use the word evangelism. So if you, as slightly informed AI champion, spread the word in your organization, in your community, it will lead to some sort of education which will have a trickle down effect. It will go down to the ground someday, and people will also become very automatically that they will know the difference between something AI generated versus something not. So the deep fakes, no matter how much proliferation happens on our WhatsApp groups or Telegram groups, people will stop paying attention to it in that utopian world. It is still far away, especially in a country like India. Maybe the West could, grapple with it faster because they are slightly more homogeneous than us as a culture. But you will start somewhere. So all these things which are happening on the outside will help in at least telling to the you can say the delinquents or the people who are misusing that there is a punitive measure that can be levied on you. So please sort out your act. And yeah, that could lead to maybe a new wave of people thinking about where should they draw a line, and how responsibly should they conduct themselves when designing AI solutions. So yeah, it's a step gradual kind of a process. It's still, I would say, not in its infancy, but it's still in its nascent stage. And but the good thing is that there is visibility around it. The very fact that all of you are gathered here on a Saturday to here means that people want to know about the ethical considerations, and why is it important? How can we be more ethical when designing AI solutions in this world which is becoming slowly and slowly more dictated by AI. So yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into the framework for balancing AI innovation with ethics. So one of the things which helps is adopting a human-centered design. So designing features with guardrails is something that all of us can adopt. So having clarity and control of what you expect from your AI system is critical. So one of the examples could be, like, for example, I told that at Flipkart, I was designing CX related features on returns, etc. So when you're designing something like a conversational AI system, like for example, you return something on Flipkart, a chatbot opens up. What are the scenarios that you're giving to that chatbot? Is it satisfying all the different conditions of return, the wishmaster delay, wishmaster mistreating you? So as a CX POC for the organization, what are the different scenarios that you can plan and train your chatbot to cater to those scenarios? That is what I talk about, a human-centered design, rather than limiting it to a limited number of options only, which doesn't encompass the entire diversity of issues or use cases someone can face. So, or can you play safe by giving like other options or something like that, so that the user is not found stuck or blocked because of limitations, right? So how can you practice a human-centered design approach when you're designing any AI platform or a system? That's the first thing that you can keep in mind. Next is identifying multiple metrics. So you can consider metrics which are across spectrum to design or to tell you about the product as a whole. So so if you want to get some, say, feedback from user surveys, the quantities that track overall system performance and long-term product health, can you look at it from a multiple metric standpoint, that you can track click-through rate, the overall customer lifetime value. You can also make sure that if your use case is that of, say, a fire alarm systems, which need to have a high recall, can you make it slightly more robust from the perspective that it needs to send alerts, even if it's a false alarm, it is still okay. So it is ensuring that your metrics are goal appropriate and context appropriate, and don't limit your AI solution to one metric, which is be all and end all. So thinking about L0, L1, L2 metrics, so that if anything is wrong, you can always do a quicker root cause analysis, which can mitigate losses, which can mitigate poor user experience.
Okay.
The more detailed it would be, the better it would be. Yes, someone said something.
Yeah, now it is. We
Sure.
lost you.
If you can be on mute, please, if you're not being, thanks. And lastly, one of the considerations that you can make is understanding the limitations of your data set and model. So a model which is trained to detect correlations should not be used to make causal inferences, right? So your model may learn that people who buy basketball shoes are taller on average, but this does not mean that the user who buys these shoes will become taller as a result of it, right? So there should be a difference between correlations and causation. So important points to note while you are designing systems. And communication, the last bullet point I think is very important, that communicate limitations to the users as much as it's possible. So for example, if you're using a machine learning algorithm to recognize specific bird species, uh, you might communicate to the user that this was trained on a small set of images from a specific region of the world, so that it is not representative of the entire ecosystem of bird species. Another example is, for example, you are making a catalog for Flipkart. Catalog is where you list the product with images, where you typically have certain models who wear that specific attire, and they are short, right? So the way it appears in that image versus the actual appearance, we get a lot of returns as a result of that, because a lot of people say that what it appeared to be on the catalog versus the actual product that we got, there was a difference. How can you improve that? Through communication. So maybe you can use actual images, use which are user generated images, and give them some sort of a aesthetic to make it part of your catalog. That could be one way. Or when you are making catalogs with these models in under ideal lighting and aesthetic circumstances, you can give like a communication that this was shot in a XYZ lighted room with a model of specific height, wearing something like this, right? So it sets that trust tone to the user that this is what it is. Uh, Responsible AI dashboard is a very good, robust system which is introduced by Microsoft. This is mainly for your further reading for those interested. So what this model does is, it follows like a two-step approach of model debugging and business decision making. And whenever you are making a model, you can run it via the Microsoft AI dashboard, and it gives a score of that model across these parameters. So it detects errors, data exploration, overview of the model, fairness assessment, model interpretability, and the counterfactual what if scenarios, which I also briefly talked about. So this is a very useful quantitative or statistical tool, you can say, which you can read about, and you can also integrate it while you're building models. So there's a quick check that you can use using responsible AI dashboard, and you will get a score which helps you compare one model with another. That am I improving as a data scientist, or as an organization as a whole? Are we building the right model? Is it, where does it lie on the scale, right? So this is a good tool which is being used. So yeah, this is how the model is designed, right? So the model debugging basically adopts a three-step approach of identifying the different error scenarios, doing a fairness assessment, then diagnosing those errors, performing the model interpretability, doing a counteractual analysis, and finally mitigating the risks which could come around unfairness, enhancing the data. Right. So this is how the working of the model is. It's a I don't think you have a free trial or something. I'm not sure, but at least you will have good amount of literature which you can read on responsible AI dashboard and use it, at least if not as a scoreboard, at least use it from a lens of doing all these steps when you create a model. And another framework is the NIST framework, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So this is a public-private partnership framework. The previous framework, which I talked to you, was Microsoft, which is completely their own proprietary private framework. This is built along with the government of US, which is AI risk management model. And it also has a four-step approach here. So it maps your model, measures its efficacy, manages any deficiencies in terms of fairness, in terms of biases, and then establishes a governance framework. So this is, one of the questions was that what all is happening on the compliance side. So there are steps being taken to make things at least more transparent, and trying to bring out more accountability. So these are examples of things which both public enterprises and private enterprises are doing. And lastly, what are the regulatory landscapes? I think everyone knows about GDPR, which is for EU citizens and requires companies to take clear consent. And if the user says to delete their data permanently, it needs to be deleted. The third point is interesting, I believe, because the government of India also has recently enacted a new privacy law called the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. This was done last year, I think around December, so very recent. And here under this act, you can leverage it to address some of the privacy concerns that come regarding the AI platforms, especially around infringing your privacy, sharing your personal data without consent. So all these things are now being regulated by India as well. And the EU AI Act is, I think, one of the recent acts which came into light, and it categorizes different AI use cases into high risk category and unacceptable risk category. So unacceptable risk category is what I've included, so that you know what all it can encompass. So for example, you have some voice activated toys that encourage dangerous behavior in children. That encompasses your unacceptable risk. So you will be banned from selling anything like this. Biometric identification and categorization of people, real-time and remote biometric identification such as facial recognition, social scoring, all these are considered as risks and unacceptable risks, and they will be banned under the EU AI Act. Chat GPT is not in unacceptable or high risk, though they have asked Chat GPT related results to be categorized as generated by GPT. So they have asked under this act, the EU AI Act, that whenever you are using Chat GPT generated results as a user, it is your prerogative to mention it as under credits that this is generated using Chat GPT. So these kind of guardrails is what they are propagating as part of this act. How much adoption it has, how strict the adoption is, it is yet to be seen. But yes, if you have found that you are violating any of this, there are strict punitive measures against it. So there is a deterrence. That's all I would like to conclude it with. Currently, there is no, if you say that there is no 100% foolproof adoption of this, at least there is a deterrence which has come as a result of all of the different compliances, regulations, awareness on the user side that um, the difference between AI generated and non-AI generated needs to be made more and more apparent. Right. So